Every Marvel Rivals player should take the time to learn Cloak and Dagger, even if they're the one and only healer that you ever learn to play. C&D is, in my opinion, one of the easiest characters to be successful with in the entire game, and it's hard to be a bad healer when you're playing them. Literally, I mean, you could just stand behind your teammates and hold the trigger down for the entire match, and you could get 20 plus KOs, 20 plus assists, and 20,000 healing done. Take this match for example. I actually didn't even have game audio for this one. I was just in autopilot mode while listening to an audiobook with my AirPods in. And still I managed to do 41,000 healing, get collectively 72 KOs and assists, and still do almost 16,000 damage, which is more than most duelists get in a single match. But there are also ways to elevate your Cloak and Dagger game, and we're going to talk about that in this video today as well. But the first thing that you need to know is that despite being a 3-star difficulty character, Cloak and Dagger is extremely approachable. So first things first, let's lay that foundation so you know how to get started. While the ceiling is actually higher right now for Luna Snow than Cloak and Dagger, in my opinion, I think a really good Luna is a lot scarier than a really good Cloak and Dagger personally. But I also think that Cloak is much easier to use well than Luna Snow is, and here's why. Cloak and Dagger doesn't really have to aim, right? So let's focus on Dagger, okay? The girl named Tandy in white clothing. When you're Dagger, everything you do heals, okay? Your primary fire will lock onto any ally in the general area of your crosshairs, and you'll throw out healing projectiles that will apply consistent small chunks of healing with each hit. Here's the great part though, occasionally an enemy will be near your crosshairs and that projectile will instead hit them and do a little damage, okay? So if you're just holding the trigger down, you're basically always doing something useful. You're either healing allies or doing a little chip damage to the enemies that they're engaged with. So if you're just trying to use her for the first time, it's really quite simple. Just stay on Dagger and hold the trigger down and you'll be helpful to your team no matter what. Now, you have two other abilities as well as Dagger. Okay, first is your right click or your alternate fire input. This throws out a bubble of constant healing called Dagger Storm. This energy field is a 5-meter sphere. It lasts for 6 seconds with a 12-second cooldown. But while you or an ally is inside the bubble, they will receive 55 healing per second. Now, let's chat about this ability real quick. The most basic application for this is to toss it out when your teammates are clustered up in a choke point so they can all sort of stand in the gap and receive constant healing. You can even throw it down preemptively when you know that a clash is about to happen, when an engagement is inevitable. Sometimes it's better to be a proactive healer than simply a reactive healer. You're going to stay ahead of the curve. And that's definitely true for Cloak and Dagger. In fact, it's one of the things that makes a better Cloak and Dagger player. I do this with my primary fire as well. I'll just start shooting my healing projectiles at allies who are stepping into a lane to engage an enemy. That way, the second they get hit with any damage whatsoever, there's already healing projectiles landing from behind to keep up with the damage instead of them taking damage and me going, oh man, I should probably start healing them. So I use the Dagger Storm similarly, often preemptively, to anticipate incoming damage. Another main application of the Dagger Storm is to keep yourself alive. Okay, so Dagger can't apply self-healing with anything in her standard kit besides Dagger Storm. So if you take damage, you can toss the Dagger Storm at your own feet, or you can hug an ally who also needs healing and toss it down so that both of you are inside the radius and both of you receive healing. I'll also use Dagger Storm a lot to offset a diver like Spider-Man or Venom. So when they drop down on me, that Dagger Storm goes down at my feet, and then I can immediately swap to Cloak and start dealing damage and fighting back while getting that constant healing. The last application of the Dagger Storm that I want to note is that sometimes I will use it to react to a bad situation where our main tank is about to go down. So we really need that meat shield to stay up. So I'll throw out my E ability, which is this light shield, this light wall, which we'll talk about next. Then I'll throw the Dagger Storm down on them. And then immediately I switch to just doing a steady stream of primary fire called your Lightforce Daggers. This is our best way of applying big chunk healing as Cloak and Dagger. Just throwing everything at them in that order, and order matters. We'll talk about that next. Now we're going to chat about the E ability called Veil of Lightforce. Okay, this is a wall 6 meters wide that applies 45 healing as soon as it touches any ally. So this is great when teammates are clustered up in front of you, but one thing that commonly gets overlooked is that any ally it touches also gets a 15% bonus to all incoming healing for 4 seconds. So when an ally is at critical health and we need to do a ton of healing fast, it's best to lead with the Veil of Lightforce and then start applying healing after it. That will heal them much faster. This wall of light and healing will travel 25 meters before dissipating, so it's got some pretty serious range to it, so feel free to toss it out from like downtown. Alright, now let's talk about Cloak. This is the male in this like sort of blackish purple clothing. Hitting shift on PC will swap to your alternate character, and it's the rapid swaps from one character to the next and that seamless transition into another character's kit, right? That's what will elevate your Cloak and Dagger game, is when you can seamlessly jump back and forth from both modes and use abilities on the fly that you need to use. And I think people get a little overwhelmed at this swap and adjusting to a different kit, but their kits are really quite similar, so it's really not all that daunting. Let's start with the primary fire. So Cloak's main attack is just a steady stream of constant damage at a range of 20 meters, which is pretty good. And it has infinite ammo, no need to reload it, okay? This does considerably more damage than Dagger's primary fire, so whenever you feel the need to deal damage in a fight, make sure you swap to Cloak. It also has a very forgiving hitbox, similar to Scarlet Witch's primary fire. But if you get an enemy really, really weak and they decide that they need to run away, as soon as they get 20 meters out, go ahead and swap back to Dagger. As her primary fire, it may do less damage, but it has much greater range. In fact, you don't even need to lock on. If they're outside of the range of the lock-on ability, you can just throw it in their direction. You might still land the shot anyways. So it's great for enemies who are running away, great for finishing off Spider-Mans or Flyers who get just outside of Cloak's 20-meter range. While we're on the subject of dealing damage as Cloak, let's talk about his E ability called Terror Cape. This is just the Dark Force version of Dagger's healing wall. It's just a darkness wall, okay? This ability does 3 distinct things. First, it deals damage on touch. So any enemy it comes in contact with will receive 55 damage immediately. The second thing it does is it applies a blinding condition on enemies for 1.5 seconds. This is really important, and it's so useful in several different scenarios. If you need to run away, okay, using your right-click ability, which we'll talk about next, if you need to run away, sometimes it's best to hit them with the Terror Cape first, and so they're like disoriented and blinded, and then immediately you ghost and run away. So that way they won't know which direction you ran to, so you're harder to chase because they were blinded when you bailed, so they don't know which direction you went to. They got to sort of reorient themselves. The third thing this Dark Wall does is it applies a debuff on enemies for 3 seconds, making them 28% more vulnerable to incoming damage. That is huge. Check this out. I see a Spider-Man coming head on to dive me, so I actually lead with the Terror Cape. It hits him, does 55 damage, blinds him, and makes him weaker to incoming damage, so I follow it up with my primary fire and absolutely melt him. It gives me just the edge I need to kill him before he can land his full combo on me. But I think the best way to use this ability is actually as an aid to your front line. Okay, so let's say you're standing behind your front line, you've got tanks out there, maybe a duelist, they're heavily engaged with the enemy right up close. I'll often throw down my Dagger Storm to apply constant healing, and then I'll make a rapid swap to Cloak, throw out that Terror Cape, then swap right back and continue healing. But that Terror Cape goes out, it damages enemies, it also makes them more vulnerable to the attacks of my tanks and my duelists, who, by the way, do much more damage than I can do. I know a lot of people are like, I'm a DPS Cloak main. It's like, listen, a Bucky doing 28% more damage is a lot more damage than me on Cloak doing 28% more damage. So the most impactful thing I can do in that moment is switch to Cloak and throw out that debuff wall, right? Hit the enemy, do damage, debuff them, but then switch back and focus on keeping the Bucky alive while he takes advantage of that debuff and does a ton of damage, okay? Or maybe it's letting the Thing stay alive. We focus on healing him while he's now doing, after our debuff on the enemy, 100 damage with his primary punches. 1, 2, 100 damage right there. Or 113 damage with his haymakers for a few seconds. I truly think an amazing Cloak and Dagger makes the most impact when they really know how to maximize the benefits of their Lightforce Veil and their Darkforce Veil buffs and debuffs. I know a lot of people they put a lot of emphasis on being a good Cloak is how to use your right click on Cloak and evade things and hide people. We'll talk about that next. I think the most important factor that's really going to be the biggest variable to up your game on Cloak and Dagger is how well you use your 2 E abilities, your Light Wall and your Dark Wall. Understanding when to use them, how to use them, and how to capitalize on the buffs and debuffs that they apply, that's what makes you an amazing Cloak and Dagger. By the way, your cooldowns for these things will be represented in the bottom right-hand corner. So if you switch to Cloak and you throw out your Terror Cape and you switch back to Dagger and start doing healing, it will still display the cooldown for Cloak's E ability, just in a smaller form above your standard HUD in the bottom right. So you can keep track of those things. You can also increase the size of that on your HUD as well if you find that to be too hard to see. I'm a big fan of a clean HUD. I like minimalistic. I know where to look and how to take in that information, so I don't mind it being small personally, but some people like to increase the size of that. That's an option that you've got. Now, the last Cloak ability we need to talk about is his right click called DarkTeleportation. This is your oh crap button. Okay, this ability makes you invisible and invincible for 2 seconds. You also get free flight in this state, so you can reposition to a higher ledge if you need to. Just know that someone with a keen eye can detect where you go, because you'll have this sort of dark aura around you as you're moving, so someone could see where you're going to and just attack you when you come out of it. So you got to be a little strategic about how you use this and when you use this. But if a Jeffall is going down, you can pop this and be safe. If an enemy dives on you, like Spider-Man Venom, you can pop this and get to safety if you can't win that fight. If Storm drops her ult on you, pop this. You get the idea here. But here's the cool thing. Any ally within 10 meters will also be granted that invisibility and invincibility as well. So you help them avoid those same ultimates by activating this ability while you're really close to them. So your teammates will love you forever if you don't just preserve your own life, but you help preserve their lives too when you activate this ability. The only challenge is that you have to be really good at reaction speeds sometimes, because you'll be in your Dagger form and you'll hear this enemy ultimate getting activated. That means you have to be fast enough to take in that information, swap from Dagger to Cloak, and then activate the DarkTeleportation ability before that ult goes off. That's not a lot of time, but it's also just 2 buttons, so you'll pick it up pretty quickly. Shift, and then right click. That's it. Just got to work on your response time when you hear an ability going down that you want to get out of. But there's a play in the gameplay where I actually help my teammates avoid an Eye of Agamotto, and they get cloaked as well, and then we just melt the Doctor Strange really, really quickly. Last but not least, we have Cloak and Dagger's ultimate ability called Eternal Bond. On activation, you will perform 4 dashes for 15 meters in rapid succession. Spin the camera to choose which direction you dash to. You'll leave behind a black inky trail that applies 250 healing per second to allies and 30 damage per second to enemies. These trails you leave behind, each one will last 8 seconds before dissipating, and they can no longer stack effects, so 2 overlapping trails won't do double healing or triple healing or whatever. A couple of things. This is a great support ult to help keep your teammates alive during a climactic clash, especially against enemy offensive ultimates. Or you can use it to offset an enemy Invisible Woman ult or another Cloak and Dagger ult that they do. Just make sure you're covering ground that your teammates either occupy or they need to occupy. So if you need to get to the zone but you need to get out of a choke point, you might lead the charge with your first dash, make it to the point, and then dash around the point for some good coverage. Now, you are not invincible in this ult. In fact, you are quite vulnerable because in between dashes, you stand still for a brief moment. Hawkeyes can literally one-shot you out of this ult just by timing their shot to land in that brief moment where you stand there like a mannequin. Magnetos, they can drop their ults on your head in between dashes and kill you. And you're especially vulnerable, this is important, in that second at the very end of your ult when you finish your 4th and final dash. At the end of that 4th dash, just know that you are not standing in the healing aura of your final dash. You're standing just outside of it. So you can get destroyed right then and there, and your ult will disappear, leaving your team very vulnerable. So a couple of tips. Make sure your last dash takes you back towards your team if you can help it. Also, try to end your final dash in the healing aura of a previous dash, like your 3rd or 2nd dash that you did. That way, when you come out of it, you'll be standing in a healing aura when you end your ult. Also, when you exit your ult, you may as well swap to Cloak, since you can't out-heal your own ultimate. It's like blue on black. So for a few seconds, just focus on doing damage and throwing out that Terror Cape instead. Then when you notice the healing field dissipating, just swap back then to Dagger and start the healing all over again. One last thing I will mention about Cloak and Dagger is that I think she is the easiest healer to apply healing to flying teammates. So if you've got a friendly Storm or Human Torch, something like that, I think that she's the easiest one to hit them while they're flying around, while they're trying to be erratic, trying to dodge, because they're pretty vulnerable up there. So your flying teammates will love you forever if you keep a healthy perspective and look up from time to time, and make sure you're applying healing to your flyers as well, because you can do it much more easily than, say, Jeff or Luna Snow can. So there's Cloak and Dagger's full kit. Like I mentioned, there are several ways to seriously upgrade your Cloak and Dagger game and take it to the next level, but also they are extremely easy to be good with. Not only that, I was shocked by how easy it is to level up Cloak and Dagger and get them to Lord. Fastest Lord grind of any character I've played by a landslide. I've got 8 Lords at this point, close to 9, and usually it takes between 20 and 24 hours of actual match play to get a character to Lord, depending on the requirements. But holy cow, I had Cloak and Dagger to Centurion by the 10-hour mark, and Lord at 14 and a half. I mean, you only need like 80 or so KOs and assists for 50 points on that final stretch. And then there's that one match I showed you where I had over 70 in a single match. The grind's very fast. They're crazy easy to get to Lord, honestly. You're shaving like 7 hours off of the standard grind for other characters, which is probably why I've noticed so many more Lord Cloak and Daggers than any other character except maybe Spider-Man. So if you're looking for a healer that's easy to play, has a huge impact on matches, and can be ascended to Lord status rapidly, then look no further than Cloak and Dagger. I hope you enjoyed this video, learned something new about how to optimize their kit. If you enjoyed it, would you let me know by leaving a like on the video, as that's the best free way to support the content right here on YouTube, and consider subscribing for more Rivals content and guides. And with that, I say be warm and well fed, my friends, and I hope to catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.